If not, I propose that we start with the agenda. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there are 2 points. The first one is about maintaining package in the Fortran-lang. Who proposed that?
I did.
Oh, yeah, so yeah. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go. And the second item on the agenda is was the mission statement for Fortran, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so those are the only thing. Does anybody else want to discuss anything else besides these 2 things today? All right, then I'll start with the Fortran-lang.
Do you want to share the screen?
Yeah, if I can share the screen, it'd be great.
Give you the permission then. Go ahead.
Okay. There it is. Let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, I see it.
Check it out. Yes. Have to move. The Zoom is always obstructing my tabs, so struggle with that. There it is. Cool. So this came out. So we have these packages like Wattpad. Let's see if I can find them here. There's like 4 of them that are still pretty widely used. It's like Wattpad, ODE pack. I had them like listed. Don't see them right now in the list. There it is. FFT pack, ODE pack, Mint pack, Watt pack, and there might be more. As an example, the ODE pack and Watt pack is used by SciPy, and they include the original fixed form sources in their SciPy Git tree. And so the question came up, and then SciPy, they kind of maintain their own patches, or I would say they just keep modifying, maintaining that inside SciPy. And I think the question came up many times that we, whether it would make sense to maintain these packages under Fortran-lang as a community. And so we brainstormed the kind of how it could look like, and it looks, and I would say to kind of summarize it quickly, it seems that the question came out, what does modernization mean? And things that we almost all agree upon is to provide missing tests, make sure the builds with modern compilers, online documentation. That's kind of a no-brainer. Things that I think also most agree is to provide some kind of modern Fortran interface to check either interface modules so that you can use it as a module, because those packages typically they don't use modules. They use F77 style, just loose global subroutines. So have a module that you can just use, and the compiler would check the types. I think most agree on that. Be a good stuff too. And then also it seems most people agree to perhaps convert fixed form into free form. Perhaps kind of remove or rewrite some of the obsolescence features, such as go-to statement. Some of them use it, some of them don't. Common blocks. Most of these packages actually do not use common blocks, but if they do, that would be another thing. And in general, if there is something else that's kind of obviously things that should be written, but it seems most people agree on that. Where people disagree is if we should do something beyond that. As an example, should we rewrite some of the algorithms or change the API? My own view is not to do that and be very conservative and simply keep the original API exactly as it is, because that's what codes like SciPy already use and depend on, and just do what you see listed here. And beyond that, if we want to rewrite some of the algorithms, we should start a new package and just, then we are free to do anything we want. And that way we kind of, we preserve or kind of provide a maintained versions of these packages that pack ODE pack, FFT pack, min pack, and for codes like SciPy, they can down the road can depend on that perhaps. We can also use them for benchmarking. Let's say somebody writes a new, FFT package, so we can use the FFT pack for benchmarking. So that would be my suggestion. And so, I would like to hear some feedback on that.
I'll ask a question with regards to whether to change the APIs or modernize them or what have you. What is the likelihood that projects using the existing APIs and consuming these packages from their existing locations will switch to using the Fortran-lang maintained versions? And so if you're going to make an API change, then changing the location and the way somebody consumes that package, this is the time. I'm not saying that we should. I'm just saying that's a consideration with regards to whether you want to prevent changing the API.
Well, so to answer the first question, I think the likelihood is pretty good. I talked to some of the SciPy maintainers, and they would be willing, in principle, to use our package if we maintain it. We have not brainstormed exactly the details and so on. I think if I was them, what I would like to see is some kind of uptake and some kind of, making sure it's a good investment from their side to use our version. But if we do a good job and people use it, I think they would use it also. Regarding the change of API, I would not change it. So as an example, let's say FFT pack, or even actually LayPack too, but let's say FFT pack. The interface, it makes sense to provide more simplified modern Fortran interface with, for example, so that you don't have to specify the size of the arrays as an argument, but use the shape, I think it's called. It should be in addition. So it could be, it's up to a discussion, but I think it could be maintained as a module on top of that to simplify the usage. And users don't have to use it. And that would be my recommendation.
I tend to agree with that. It was worth considering, like, there are some considerations as to what, how people are going to consume this, as to whether you have to maintain the backwards compatibility or not. So I tend to agree with backwards compatibility is something that is worth keeping if you can.
I know, yeah, I mean, so that you get the argument, Jacob, I think he kind of posted or kind of argued that it would be, that he would really like some modern implementations of these algorithms. And I agree, but I think it should be separate from, we should not reuse the name and kind of change the underlying implementation.
Right.
That seems.
I think you can have both. We can keep the original API and build a more modern one on top of it.
Here on top, and Jacob even argued, don't maintain new API on top, just rewrite it. But if that's the case, I would argue to do it as a separate package, and just kind of keep the, let's say, FFT pack as kind of as original as we can. Because yeah, go ahead.
Most of these packages, especially LayPack, use all kinds of working arrays, and they are part of the current old-style API. A simplification could be that we do the allocation of that inside the routine, so that it becomes much simpler and less error-prone to call these routines. That would still be something which is quite compatible to Fortran 77 on the outside. So for people using it from C interface, they would still not need to adhere to Fortran 90, etc. But it will give them a better interface. Yes. And then on top of that, you can do a much more modern API.
Yes, what you described is exactly what I mean by modern interface. So I've written that for LayPack also for my projects, and I like it a lot to just go, to get an eigensolver, and you just pass an array as a 2D array, and internally it allocates the proper work arrays, the proper size, calls the proper LAPACK subroutine, checks the exit type. If it fails, it fails. And so as a user, it looks almost like MATLAB or Python, just very simple interface. And that can easily be
Another
built.
thing we should. You're muted.
Yeah,
Another
go
thing
ahead.
I was thinking about is these DMAC routines.
Yeah, those are routines that I can't remember. Query some kind of hardware. Is it like the size
They
of it?
do, or they have to be adjusted to the hardware at some point. But with since Fortran 90, almost all of these things can be interpreted via standard intrinsics.
So yeah, on that, I think we might agree to maybe to modernize that. That would probably, unless there is some downside I don't see.
Yeah, well, the downside I see from the current setup is that if you make a mistake, then you would be using parameters for the wrong hardware.
Yeah, so it makes it more robust. And I think we can figure out some of these details as we go. The question really I was hoping to kind of, for you to think about and all of us to think about is whether we should try to maintain these packages under Fortran-lang. I think these little details we can I think figure out. It seems, yeah, the main question I would like to kind of figure out is if we should just maintain it. And then if we kind of agree upon that, then the details I think we can, figure out what would make sense.
Would that make them available through FPM?
Oh, I forgot about it. Yes, the packages should be installable by FPM so that we can use them easily in projects.
Oh, yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'd say any widely used Fortran packages that are, lacking for maintainers, it would absolutely be, within the scope of the Fortran-lang project to take over maintenance of them.
Yeah, it seems there is a lot of them. I would not maintain LAPACK because they are maintaining it, it's maintained elsewhere. I would not maintain RPAC NG, which is maintained elsewhere, but most of these older packages don't really have a maintainer. It's typically people, myself included, just kind of copying it on their own GitHub account, and then some people contributing a little bit, and then it's just kind of scattered all over. And I think consolidating it under Fortran-lang umbrella, it just gives them more legitimacy, I think, and also kind of encourages the community to just maintain one version. So I'm personally very excited about that. I think it would be great to do that if people agree. Steve, what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea?
You're still muted, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm always a big believer in not breaking people's programs because you change the API. And so, I admit I wasn't following I haven't been following this discussion in the forum, but that's, if you want to create a new API, go for it, but don't remove the old one and don't break the old one. And the thing is, one of the things I always say about Fortran is that your code, from decades ago still works. And if you're going to be promoting a library and, for people to use, except that, it's, a couple of years from now, it may just stop working or do something different. That's not going to engender a lot of confidence in the users.
Yes, yeah, that's my approach too. Just maintaining the original API, but in addition, as an option, if people want, we can have a more modern API.
Yeah.
And the question, do you think it's a good idea, Steve, to kind of move some of these packages under the Fortran-lang GitHub organization and maintaining it as a community there.
Would you say that again? I didn't
Yeah.
quite get it.
Oh, so I'll show you maybe on my screen. So it's so we have this Fortran-lang GitHub.
Oh, where you put it?
Yeah. And so what the main, yeah.
You know, well, I mean, as somebody also who maintains websites, I hate broken links. So, you know, if you can redirect places, but, you know, that's fine if you want to move something, as long as, but, you know, people have links to, you know, where did I get this package? I got it from here. Well, then somebody follows that link and they get a 404 or something like that. That's not good. So, you know, if you're going to reorganizing the site is fine, as long as you make sure that at least if somebody uses an old link, they at most are presented with a page that says, oh, we might have moved this. Here's how to find it again.
So a lot of these packages don't actually have any modern home. They're typically at Netlib. That's the only home that they have. And then, so we would essentially start a new repository for those packages under this Fortran-lang organization. So that we just, there will be a new, you know, link to that GitHub repository, and we will start maintaining, you know, kind of maintaining it, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically
fine.
packages that either, you know, don't have a home anymore. There's no way to find them again anymore, other than, you know, knowing somebody who happens to have a copy, or the place that they are available hasn't been touched in a decade. So, you know, nobody's maintaining them.
You know, you can keep in mind, you know, Google searches too, you know, is if somebody's searching for something, where are they going to find it?
Any other comments? So if not, looks like most people, actually everybody looks like it's on board. Well, what I'll do is because not everybody's at this phone call, I'll email in the discourse. I'll kind of ask one more time, perhaps, you know, see if anybody's against. But I think after that we can start, you know, maintaining some of these packages under Fortran-lang. Okay, so the next topic was long-term vision for Fortran. So who proposed it? Jeremy, do you know?
Martin proposed it, and then you came back from, I think, discourse also.
Yeah.
So Martin, do you want to lead the discussion?
Yeah, I can do that. So I think we had already a little bit of the discussion that is on GitHub also going on about, yeah, Andre also commented on that a little bit, the question, okay, how to move forward. I think, yeah, one thing is, I mean, I wrote there something like, okay, if I see F7070 code, I simply want to scream and run away. So I have really the impression that the backward compatibility strategy of Fortran is yeah, too strong, and it in my opinion hampers moving forward with the language, because people, of course, I agree with Steve, it's nice if you have old code and it still compiles after years, but on the other hand, if I see my PhD student, if they do something in Python with NumPy, which is all based on Fortran, like inverting a matrix or whatever, you just write something like invert. And if you want to use the original LaPeX interface, it's horrible. You just need to dig through the documentation and so on and so forth. So I think that it really what we just discussed before, having modern interfaces that rapid or that lead to rapid development would be really nice. And at some point, I think it, in my opinion, makes simply sense to tell people, okay, if you don't want to invest in your code that you're using for 40 years, it's fine, but I don't want you to hold my projects back. And that was where I said, okay, if you give people 10 years to modernize their code, in my opinion, that's in IT still a very long time. But yeah, that was just it started all because I found this rant on GitHub where I thought, I cited it a little bit above. I just thought, okay, especially now looking at the new 2002X standard, where I don't see really that there's a lot of new things coming in. In my opinion, it's relatively disjunct from the features that people requested. And I have the impression that, yeah, the backward compatibility and the efforts of the maintainer stop Fortran from becoming a modern language. Yeah, that's, yeah, maybe I think it always, yeah, raises a lot of pros and cons. And yeah, I find this discussion interesting, and I think it helps to get a clearer picture about the future.
So, and I think, so if I understand what you're saying kind of shortly, is that you don't like seeing like F77 code and people coding in this old style, and which I agree, of course. I think we all probably agree. But what you're proposing is that maybe Fortran can be more aggressive in deprecating features. Is that some of your suggestions?
I mean, I basically don't want anyone to do any coding in what I want to do. I'm just, if I look at what Fortran can do today, I think it cannot do some things that language today needs, like exceptions, unit tests. If you, for example, look on how unit testing is integrated into Rust, it's a totally different thinking. And the thinking is there, okay, if I write a code, I write a unit test, and then I'm not afraid to touch it. And Fortran has this tendency to say, okay, it runs, I will never touch it again because I might break something. And so as I said, I don't want to force anyone to use these modern features, but I would request Fortran to have them. And my impression is really, if you look at G-Fortran, the only compilers that I can use, I mean, there might be some others commercials, is Intel and G-Fortran. So PGI or NVIDIA does not work because it does not support the new features. And what I also say here, I mean, I'm speculating, but my impression is that the compiler vendors basically don't have manpower to implement new things. And for that reason, they block new investments. And maybe they get more time if they don't have to care about, okay, does it still compile Fortran 77? That's a speculation, but as I said, I'm a little bit disappointed with the 2020X, especially when you compare it to the features that were people asking for.
Steve, do you want to say something?
Yeah, there's a lot I have to say. Well, first of all, okay, features people were asking for. We ran a survey for 6 months, publicized it widely, and got well over 100 responses. And the 202X feature set was drawn directly from that. So it is absolutely not true that Fortran is not doing things that people asked for. Now, the other thing, comment I want to make, well, there are actually a whole bunch of comments. As far as compiler vendors go, if you look, G-Fortran is, look at what Steve Cargill writes in the complying Fortran. Nobody is volunteering to develop it anymore, and all of a lot of the focus is going elsewhere. So there are things that don't work. Some of the other vendors, yeah, they don't have a lot of resources. Intel, I know, it has an awful lot of resources, but in terms of the old features, that it does not cost anything for a compiler to continue supporting the old features. In fact, it costs something for them to take them out. When you say Fortran 77 code, you're really meaning fixed form source. And there's somebody talking in the background. It's what people are taught.
Can you mute everybody except Steve? I cannot.
Well, yeah. if you teach free-form source, you teach the modern features, that's what people are going to use. They're, yeah, I certainly am horrified if I see new code written as fixed form source in all uppercase. But that's not a shortcoming of the Fortran language, which provides a more modern way of representing it. It's just people are used to doing certain things this way, or they've been taught a particular way, and they don't know about the new things. So those of us who evangelize Fortran try to change minds, try to educate people. I disagree with the notion that Fortran has to do everything that every other language does. That's the way to ruin. And at this point, I'm going to stop and let other people talk.
Gary, you are next.
Yeah, I'm going to emphasize, I think, a little bit of what Steve was saying. For one, Fortran, the programming set of solution problems that Fortran has been intended to solve and will continue to be intended to solve are not the same as a Rust or some other, some of these other languages. If the goal is really about scientific computation and numeric computation, the value of things like unit tests aren't nearly as I think necessary as things in other in a lot of the other languages, C++ or Haskell or Rust. The thing about Fortran 77, and again, to Steve's point, fixed form is orthogonal to the new features, and there's probably a lot of people who are coding in fixed form still because of consistency with the existing projects that they have, even if they are making use of new features, and so it's probably not. It probably depends a lot on which project are you looking at to determine whether or not, are they really stuck in Fortran 77, or are they stuck in fixed form because the project was already in fixed form? My experience with most people is that they really want to concentrate on what you would consider value-added changes to the applications that they're working on, and a mass conversion of format is not a value-added change in terms of function points delivered to the people who are using the application. It's certainly a good feature in terms of familiarity and consistency maybe with modern practice, but if it interferes with or competes against people's ability to actually make changes to the code that are meaningful to the application users, they're not likely to do it. The other thing I want to mention too is about the compiler vendors. Part of it is Fortran 202X was intended to be a very small incremental change to the standard, and that's part of the reason you don't see a lot of big changes to it. We were trying to swing the pendulum back a little, quite a bit from 10 years between versions of the standards to something more like 3 or 4, and that's caused us to not add a lot of the large features that people might want to consider. The fact that the committee is very small, 1/10 the size of say C++, means that there's a relatively small number of features that can be considered, that can be rationalized against the existing very large standard and incorporated into the language. It's actually relatively few things that don't get in just because because there's concern about implementation. It's much more just the unwieldy nature of the language itself. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Gary. Martin, go ahead.
It's me again. Yeah, maybe one comment on what people requested and what is in the standard. So I think in the template, like generic programming or templates was way up. And then we get something like A equals D and things where you simply need to multiply the argument with a number. I mean, okay, I'm not in the standard committee, but this is, as I simply said before, this is not the yeah, these were not the changes that I expect and that I'm looking for. Also, exception handling was high up, and I understand that you can live without it, but if you use a language that supports it, it's a quite nice feature. And yeah, for unit testing also. And regarding the comment, okay, Fortran is meant for numerical programming. I have now some students working on machine learning. No one of them, I mean, it's heavy computation, and no one of them is Fortran. They all use Python, maybe Julia. Of course, I know it has a C backend. It might have a Fortran backend, but I'm pretty sure that we are losing a whole generation of people who do numerical simulation to other languages. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I have a solution, but that is what I observe. No one, if you propose someone, okay, do a Fortran project, at the moment, this is not how you attract students. They want to use something fancy, and they want to do numerics. I mean, that's not the case, but they just use other languages. And I think if you're, or I think we are all concerned about Fortran. And I'm not, as I said, I'm not saying that I have a solution, but I clearly have this observation, and I guess all of you have.
Yeah, so I'll see if you think so. I when I got involved with kind of the standards committee and everything else, kind of actively, maybe I think I started 2 or 3 years ago. I agree with almost everything that you just said, Martin. I'm very concerned about, I would say, very concerned about Fortran and the future, and everything you said is exactly how I felt also. But I think I have the solutions for everything you mentioned. I just gonna mention just a few things. So the unit testing, the question is, should it be in the part of the language? Maybe it doesn't have to be, that's more like a tooling issue. But I think that's a minor thing. The bigger thing is the compilers. Maybe the major thing, I would say even. So I started a compiler myself called Fortran, and I think it's possible to develop it as a community. We have now 3 Google Summer of Code students. All of them got up to speed very quickly. I think it's just a question of how we organize ourselves to be more efficient in terms of, we each have some time, and we organize ourselves efficiently. I think we can pull it off. I think what Fortran is missing is, or what I'm trying to fix myself is, most other languages like Julia, Python, Rust, they have a community maintained compiler where the whole community helps to contribute to it, and they are able to pull it off. And I think Fortran can pull it off also, and we can have even more than one. That is flying the SG Fortran from just the open source compilers. Then we have the commercial ones. A lot of the other things you mentioned is, you suggested as an idea to get rid of or maybe deprecate things sooner to make it easier for compilers to support new features. But I think technically, I think we can have both, and we should keep the old features around so that we can keep compiling old code, and we can still develop new features in Fortran. Then you mentioned, and I agree that people are missing some features such as generics or perhaps exceptions. I would argue they are not as important to numerical programming as for example in C++ or Python. You really need to have these features. But that being said, I think they will be useful, and we are working on them as part of the Fortran Standards Committee. It's a lot of work. It's an incredible lot of work actually to get to develop, let's say, the generics. If you want to join us, we have the generics repository at J3 Fortran umbrella, and you are welcome to. And if you have some suggestions, how we can speed up the process, how to get it in, let us know. And I would say the last thing, I think the main thing that Fortran was missing was organized community, and I think we have fixed that problem with Fortran-lang and the discourse, as well as these monthly calls. And we have, let's say, just the Discord. We have hundreds of users there. And I see people even just around me kind of independently finding that and joining and participating. And I think with that, we can fix every other problem. Once we have the community that's kind of focused, and at one place on the internet, we can fix things. And one last thing I'll say is that if you search Fortran in any search engine, Fortran-lang.org comes as the first or second page. In other words, when people search for Fortran, they will find our page. And so they will then, whatever we put at the page, as we currently have links to the discourse and so on, we can use that resource to organize pretty much anybody and organize ourselves better. I'll just stop here, but I have pretty much ideas how to fix every single issue that you mentioned. It just doesn't happen overnight, it just takes time. I think Brad is next.
Yeah, with regards to breaking backwards compatibility in the name of moving forward and introducing new features, one of the big selling points for Fortran is its history and legacy. And my understanding with talking from people who've been involved in Fortran and even on the committee for a long time is that backwards compatibility is a huge part of why Fortran has maintained its popularity and history and selling points. So trying to break backwards compatibility in the name of getting new features is kind of, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So, and in terms of those new features, a lot of them, yeah, they are really big and hard, especially for a committee the size of the Fortran committee. And so we are working on some of them. The generics has been very heavily invested in over the last year or so. There was no way we were going to get it in the 22x time frame, so we're still working on it in the background. The push is to get it done for 22y, the next standard. But it's a big feature, and fitting it in with a lot of the other aspects of the language is hard and takes time. And a lot of this other stuff is community driven and tooling based, and Fortran, or Andre and Milan, who have been putting together the Fortran-lang organization, have done a really great job over the last couple of years. Like, I'm amazed how much progress we've made, and the tooling is getting much better. The community is starting to rally around this, and I think we're headed in the right direction. I think all of the things you're asking for are starting to be addressed, and we'll get there without having to break backwards compatibility, which is, again, one of the main selling points of Fortran is write your code and it'll run as is for the next 50 years. That was all I had.
Yeah, thank you all for these comments. I think that also that backward compatibility is really important. It's really nice to see that you can still use code from the 70s or 80s, as it is my case quite often. So any other comments on the topic? Andre, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was said. It's just things like that. Unfortunately, they don't get fixed overnight, and so it just takes time. But for example, just starting a new compiler, it takes years to get to the point where it starts compiling most of people's codes and it's actually useful. And that's true for any compiler. And the same thing with the community and the tooling. It's just, I wish it was already all fixed, and it's not fixed. I'll be honest, but I think we are on the way to fixing it. It just takes time. I kind of, to give you a time frame, I'm hoping maybe 2 years ago I was telling my managers, give us 5 years. Now I'm telling them, give us 3 years. So I'm hoping in 3 years the tooling, things like the FPM, the Fortran Package Manager, will be advanced enough and used by the community enough that people will not doubt it, and will be, a lot of the tooling will be fixed. Arjen, go ahead.
Yes, what I wanted to add to Brad's remarks, I think that the tooling, things like FPM, having a standard library, having a place where packages can be found is at least as important as bringing in new features into the language. Of course, that has to be done as well, but being able to just pick up some library which can be useful for you is so much easier now than it was, say, 2 years ago. And what I hear from colleagues is that they really want to have all the modern things that an IDE can provide. And right now there are a few IDEs that can do that with Fortran. I think we're seeing quite some development there. Whereas a few years ago it was well, very bare ground. That's my my impression at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Martin, do you want to say? To add to
Yeah,
that?
so many thanks, first of all, for all your comments. And I totally agree, of course, with this aspect of the community, which I found also very impressive. And if someone would have told me that maybe 3 years ago, of course, I would have just laughed out loud. So I think you're all right that it's heading in the right direction. Yeah, and I simply hope that maintaining backward compatibility is yeah, worth the effort, and the time invested on that is well invested time. I currently still doubt it a little bit, but of course I can be convinced by the opposite, and yeah, would be glad to see that.
Martin, if you want, post kind of a summary maybe of the things that you would like Fortran to improve, and I mean not just the language, the whole ecosystem, onto the discourse. And I'm happy to kind of provide you some like my ideas how to fix them in the long run. And we can kind of discuss some of the details if you want further.
Yeah, I'll do.
Yeah, great, thank you. I see there are a lot of things mentioned in the chat. I didn't read them. Are there something in the chat that was not said here that you would like to mention?
I guess Vipul's mentioned that it's extremely difficult to get features into the language, and yeah, it's it is. That I would say that it's a good thing, because I don't. But I would argue that it might be a good thing, but for some of the other things we are trying to fix, that might be a bad thing too. But if you have ideas how to speed it up, how to make it easier, let us know. We have, I would mention for everybody, we have the J3 Fortran / Fortran proposals incubator repository where anybody can propose things and we discuss it and we try to present it to the committee. I think, was it Vipul first or Gary first? I didn't see it. Vipul, why don't you go ahead and then Gary?
Yeah, it was Whipple.
Okay, Vipul, go ahead.
Well, thank you all for your time. Just wanted to apologize. I am currently at a location using a laptop, an older laptop where the camera is broken, so I couldn't turn my camera on. I feel very bad about talking with the camera off, so I apologize for that. And secondly, just to introduce myself, I work as a process and chemical engineer and a thermodynamicist in chemicals and manufacturing industry. And I post as a Fortran fan on the Fortran forums. And now I'm currently no longer coding much in Anger, but a few years ago, I had to interface with a lot of computational technology engineering kind of code, all of which was based in Fortran, but all but one of 82 code bases have moved away from Fortran. And where I see in industry, really there is no real need for Fortran anymore. Yeah, sure, if Fortran were to step up to the plate and do like an outstanding job, then a lot of codes can make use of Fortran. The industry that I work in is now really at the center of the kind of a global battle, if you will, in terms of fossil fuels versus green energy kind of a thing that is happening. And there is probably, if you look at the president of the United States, that it is not a joke that about climate change and so on. And the industry that we work in, I work in, would be considered by many to be the polluters, who have kind of caused the problem. And now there is going to be tremendous work ahead. And we are talking about trillions of dollars of investments towards moving away from fossil fuels. And from where I see, there is so much investment coming in the area of computational science and technology. Something that I'm immediately working on involves the hydrogen economy, where there is so much work needs to be done, and there is so much simulation code either being written or envisioned, and Fortran is nowhere in sight. Okay, it is mind-boggling to me that is a fundamental problem that the President of the United States says is not a joke, and people do think it is a joke. And towards solutions for that, Fortran cannot be seen simply anywhere. And again, the problems that that Fortran faces are pretty much the 5 or 6 things in the survey that Steve talked about, the WGY survey from a few years ago. And what is entirely lacking in my mind is vision, which is the topic of this call, and that's what interested me to join in. And I find that there is not a vision. Now, to give you a couple of simple examples. We need exceptions and exception handling. Just to give you a simple illustration, I do calculations to, or people around me do calculations towards properties of gases, let's say hydrogen, and there will be billions of calculations done, and there'll be 1 or 2 out of the billions which may fail because the input into the conditions are outside the physical range where hydrogen can exist as a fluid. And we put in Fortran codes that were there before so much of guards against those 1 or 2 exceptional scenarios, which makes the codes so difficult to maintain, so lengthy. If Fortran had exception handling, then those 1 or 2 cases that fail will be those exceptional situations, and the language would take care of them. Now, where does the vision come in? If you were to build in anything with exception handling, chances are they will be enabled. The grease in the wheel for exception handling would be a highly kind of flexible and extensive enumeration system. Fortran 2002X is trying to implement enumerations, and what is going in is like completely backward. It's so diluted, it is laughable. If I mention that to anybody in my industry, I'll get laughed out of the rooms out there. And now I've been saying for so long that if you want to do exceptions, you need a whole bunch of other infrastructure that feeds into that. And enumerations being one simple thing. And you just can't get that in. It is like mind-boggling the kind of resistances that come in. Time and again, it is like, let's do the bare minimum that the implementers are willing to implement. And implementers most of them haven't even come too close to implementing Fortran 2003. By the time it comes around, we won't need as I said, as today, Fortran is not needed for so many things. By the time a lot of these things come around, people would have advanced so far ahead with other languages. Why even bother with that then? I'm extremely sorry to be frustrated, but I've tried to be involved. And I'm trying now to really take more of a back for this thing. What I have done is I have put a reminder on my calendar for May of 2024 and to see where things stand, because now, out of all the work that Andrej and Milan have done, I said, let's give them the 3 years timeline and see where things are. But I see, as I say, I see a lack of vision in terms of feature sets that need to go into the language. And I made a simple connection between exceptions and enumerations, how the two can feed into each other. And I can make a long story about many, many other things which are needed with generics and so on. But there's a constant danger of everything getting diluted because the implementers want to take the minimalist approach. And Fortran does not get served right by this minimalist approach.
So Gary should be next. There's like a lot to unfold. So Gary, leave me some few minutes at the end. I have some ideas for people. Gary, go ahead.
You're muted, Gary.
I don't. Sorry, had a call coming in. Yeah, Whipple, I hear your frustration. One thing I will mention is, like I said, part of it's a lack of bandwidth. I think part of it too is a lack of the Fortran standard as it is today. The semantics have grown like Topsy over time, and so there are so many corner cases, edge cases, descriptions of this, in the standard that say, well, this applies unless this and this and this, and so on. And so it makes it extremely difficult, I think, to add sweeping changes. Co-arrays, for example, touched everything, and that's part of the reason it ended up being 10 years between versions of the standard. We can always use more help. I mean, Steve and I won't speak for Steve, but some of us are representing ourselves on the standards committee as and have the right to add people as alternates to ourselves to participate in the standards activity. Milan Kurchik, who isn't on the call right now, for example, is my alternate because Milan seems to show a lot of interest in what's going on in the Fortran community and in the language itself. And so he's got a lot of responsibility and authority with respect to my opinions about what we do, what we work on, and how things are approached. I'm open to adding more people who have a strong interest in the language and seeing it grow and continue. Just reach out to me and we can talk about adding you as an alternate, and then all of a sudden you start coming to the meetings. And we as a collective group in our representing my organization have one vote on the standing on the formal votes, but can participate all we want on the subcommittees or the subgroups and the straw votes. So ollie ollie oxen free, as they say. But they probably don't say anywhere but here in the US. Anyway, that's all I had to say is, yeah, we help out. I'm not unsympathetic to any of the concerns that have been raised. Not at all.
I just want to mention, I agree with most of the things you said, Vipul, and I'm as frustrated as you are. My own approach, I don't know if it helps you, but my own approach is I kind of gave up on the big codes when people want to move away at a big company or corporation or national lab. They want to move away from Fortran. There's nothing I can do, absolutely nothing. So I'm not, I'm not stressed out by that. I know it's coming. I know it has, a lot of people moved already, and there'll be more codes that people will move away. But things that I can influence and have influenced is getting new people into Fortran and new code starting in Fortran. And I think that's a healthy approach always. Fortran has to have new people moving in and new projects being started, and then we can influence, and we can, there's not much time on this call, but as I mentioned before, the community, all the tooling, all that stuff, that really helps. The last thing I'll mention, Fortran is 70 years old or something like that. It's old, and so adding, and as Gary mentioned, it's really tough to get, let's say, the generics in with all the corner cases and everything. And last thing I'll mention is that you don't have to go through the committee if we implement new features in a compiler, any compiler, and let people use it and test it out. It will speed up the communication and the process tremendously. And I think that we'll be able to do that in a few years, either in Flag or Fortran or any other compiler that people would like to use. We should prototype these new features. Once we have a prototype, it will go much faster with the committee.
That's true. The committee is very interested in adopting things that become de facto standards. So create de facto standards.
Great, thank you for this discussion. It's about 9 here in Europe. One quick comment to close the discussion. Otherwise, I guess it can be continued in Discourse or GitHub by all of us. Yeah, if there are no other comments, yeah, please continue this discussion, interesting discussion on GitHub or Discourse. Any other quick business to mention? No. Good. Then I propose to close the meeting. Thank you all, and we'll organize the meeting in 1 month again. Good.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
See you next
everybody.
time.
Thank you. Bye.